We're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Harden. I'm a legislative attorney here for Legislative Services. And we're going to be talking today about the legislative branch and its non-discrimination and harassment policy. I'm going to be speaking. I have a few slides here that I'm going to go over to help guide us through this. And then our Human Resources Director, Kelly Da Silva, is also on board here, and she'll take over from there. All right, so let's first look at where we find our protections against discrimination. We have a variety of federal laws that protect us against discrimination, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Age Discrimination Employment Act, just to name a few. We also have the Individual Dignity Clause in the Montana Constitution. That clause states that the dignity of the human being is inviolable. No person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws. Neither the state nor any person, firm, corporation, or institution shall discriminate against any person in the exercise of his civil or political rights on account of race, color, sex, culture, social origin or condition, or political or religious ideas. Under the Montana Code Annotated, we are protected from discrimination in Title 49, Chapters 2 and 3, also known as the Montana Human Rights Act and the Governmental Code of Fair Practices. And lastly, we have protection under the policy here at the legislative branch, and that's going to be what we're specifically covering today. But before we get into the policy, let's go over just some basics first. It's important that you understand what discrimination is. A basic definition is an adverse action in a protected area taken against someone because of their protected class status. But to really understand that definition, of course, we also need to understand some of those key terms within the definition. So first up is protected area. Protected areas include employment, public accommodations, governmental services, housing, education, insurance, financial transactions. Then we have the term protected classes. So protected classes include age, and under federal law, typically age is only a protected class over the age of 40, but here in Montana, based on our Montana Human Rights Act, somebody is protected from discrimination based on age at any age. Then we also have the protected class of sex. Sex includes the categories of biological sex, gender identity, nonconformity with sex stereotypes, pregnancy, and sexual orientation. Then we have race, which can include ancestry, physical or cultural characteristics, anything that you can relate back to race. We also have color as a protected class, which is distinct from race. It's based on shades of skin color. Then we have protected class of religion. This would be a sincerely held religious belief or even the absence of religion. In Montana, we specifically have the protected class of creed. It's not defined in code, but it's been looked into as deeply held beliefs. This could be something as far as vegetarianism, possibly white supremacy. So anything that somebody holds as a deep creed they would believe in. We also have the protected class of disability. Then we have national origin, marital status. This would be whether or not you're married or even who you were married to. Montana also has the protection of vaccination status. And then we have military service and veteran status, political belief. This would be your stance on issues of public concern that you share publicly. And this is only applicable in the area of governmental service. And then we also have familial status in housing, and that's whether or not you have children. And again, that just applies in the area of housing. So it's important to note that harassment and retaliation are both part of discrimination laws as well. So when we're talking about harassment, we're looking at offensive or unwelcome conduct based on a protected class that was so severe or pervasive that it altered the conditions of employment and created an abusive work environment. We're going to talk a little bit more about harassment in just a few slides because our policy does go into depth on harassment. And then when we're looking at retaliation as a part of discrimination, retaliation is defined as a significant adverse act against a person because he or she engaged in protected activity. When we're looking at protected activity, that would be opposing discriminatory acts, so making a complaint, for example, participating in an investigation into a discrimination complaint. So if you act as a witness or you participate in any way into an internal or a formal investigation of discrimination. And also if you request a disability or religious accommodation, that is considered protected activity under retaliation. Okay, so looking at our legislative branch policy specifically, now that we have those definitions underway, let's first look at where we find our protections. Excuse me, I guess I've skipped ahead here. So when we're looking at our legislative branch policy, we're looking at some basic core principles here. We're encouraging employees to promptly report any discrimination or harassment by an employer, an employee, a legislator, a lobbyist, or a state officer or employee, or even a member of the public. We're looking at the branch to promptly investigate these complaints. We're going to be ensuring equal employment opportunity and prohibit discrimination or harassment. And we're looking at the core belief that we're going to be appropriately disciplining an employee for substantiated charges of illegal discrimination or harassment. Okay, good. Track. So as we've discussed, discrimination can be illegal and against branch policy. When we're talking about discrimination, the general definition that I went over earlier still applies. However, the branch policy, as I mentioned, specifically speaks about harassment and sexual harassment. So let's spend a few minutes talking about that. So harassment is a type of discrimination. It is verbal or physical conduct that denigrates or shows hostility towards an individual based on the person's protected class status. Someone can be harassed based on any of the protected classes that I've mentioned before. And it's this type of conduct that can be anything from epithets, slurs, stereotyping. It can be threats and intimidation. It can even mean jokes, or if you're displaying graphic material in the workplace, or maybe you're playing audio or music that would be offensive or graphic as well in the workplace. And since harassment can be based on any protected class, sexual harassment is a subset or a subcategory of harassment as well. Sexual harassment is also illegal and against branch policy, and is specifically outlined in our policy. So under our policy, sexual harassment is defined as unwelcome advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. When, for example, the submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. Perhaps the conduct is submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as the basis for an employment decision that would affect the individual being harassed, or even when you have conduct when it has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with an individual's work performance, or it creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. And it's important to note when you're talking about harassment, even if you're dealing with things that were perhaps a joke or unintentional, the motive really isn't important here. It's got to be analyzed under a standard of a reasonable person and also the subjective feelings of the person who is alleging harassment. And so let's talk just a moment about what our policy says an employee should do if they feel they have been discriminated against. First, the employee should report the conduct within 10 days to a supervisor or a superior. This could be their direct supervisor, it could be the division director, division chief legal counsel, or the human resources manager. The report can be made on the discrimination or harassment complaint resolution form. This form can be found at the back of our policy, or it can also be made verbally or in some other written form if the person so chooses. After making that complaint, next, an investigation or inquiry into the complaint will be conducted. This will include things such as getting statements from the parties involved, any other witnesses, and weighing the facts and applying current law. So policy also states that the person receiving the report of discrimination must contact Kelly, our HR director, within 20 days, and the results of an investigation must be disclosed to the offended employee and the alleged offender before those 20 days are up. So there are timelines involved as well as far as conducting the investigation. The results of the investigation could have three potential outcomes. One is that the complaint may be found to be frivolous and no action will be taken in that case. Another outcome could be that the complaint has merit and a resolution will be made without further investigation. And then the third possibility could be that the complaint has merit and a third-party investigation is necessary. If the complaint is unsubstantiated, a copy of the finding will be placed in the confidential employee file of the offended employee. The employee can then pursue a formal grievance at that point if they wish to do so. If the complaint is substantiated by the investigation and the offender is an employee, then appropriate disciplinary action will be taken against the offender. And of course, confidentiality will be maintained throughout the entire process. And so that is a brief overview of our policy. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over now to our Human Resources Director, Kelly DeSilva.
Hello. I'm going to share, I'm just going to go over if a legislator is involved, what the discrimination and harassment process flow chart involves. So I'm just going to share my screen. Did that share correctly, Andrea? It did?
Yes.
It's not showing on me very well. Okay. So if a legislator is involved, the complaint goes in and it could go to the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate or the majority or minority leader or majority or minority whip. It can also come to me as the HR manager. And if it goes to the leadership, they do then have to report it to me. I will then work with the complainant to fill out our resolution form that we have. And I will document this and I will contact the legislative conduct panel. This panel is the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and it is the Senate or House minority leaders and anybody else that's delegated. This panel will then convene within 3 days during session or 15 days during the interim, and they will conduct a preliminary inquiry. And as Andrea said, they will determine whether it's a frivolous, has merit, and we can do further investigation, or has merit and has to go to a third party. If a third party is involved, the Chief Legal Counsel, who is currently Todd Everts, will procure a third-party investigator who will do this investigation. If it has merit and the resolution is without further investigation, then we go forward. If it's frivolous, we still go forward. I will update the complaint of the process. And then the conduct panel will make a recommendation based on if there is merit and there's a resolution. And as you can see, there's different things that can be done with the resolution. They can request that the legislator attend training, refer to counseling, or disciplinary action, or deny access to the complainant. The Speaker of the House or the committee on committees can remove the legislator from the committee assignments or chair position, as can the President of the Senate. They can refer the matter to the Ethics Committee, who will hear the matter in accordance with its procedures and make a recommendation to the body. And then there may be some other actions that are considered, which could include referral to law enforcement. After all of this, the panel informs the complainant, and then the complainant has the right at that point. They can appeal by going to the Human Rights Bureau or talking further with the panel. So that's all I have. If there's any questions, if anybody wants to raise their hands, we can address any of those.